the canning jars and wrap them up tight, screw the lids on, and then we're coming into a time where things are going to get much more expensive. In the rollout of central bank digital currencies, I am absolutely sure they're going to be tied to a digital rationing card, because they're just going to say something like, it's only this time. It's only for one thing. Now, for these third set of storms, they had 2 green skies and 1 red sky, and the shelf clouds are just something to behold. Nature is absolutely 1000% giving us clearer warnings in the coloration of the sky.
Civilization Cycle interviews experts and individuals who understand the intensifying cycle of economic, societal, and government upheaval, so you can stay ahead of the changes in our world and keep your family safe. Fortunately for us, we can recognize that we're at the precipice, a point in history where we can all see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us. So let's start the conversation, and welcome to the show.
Welcome, Eagles, to another edition of Trad Cat Night special guest exclusive podcast. I am your host, Eric Gajewski from tradcatnight.org. We've got David DuByne here, one of my favorite shows to do every month from Adapt 2030. David, welcome back to the show. And it looks like over the last week or so, what's really taking precedence is a lot of flooding happening here. Not only the ones that is going on here in Europe, Central Europe, but how about that 1 in 1,000 year rainfall that landed in Carolina Beach, or something like 18 inches in like a half a day or something? It was in the Wilmington area. Talk to us about some of the latest earth changes here.
Well, thanks for having me back. And it's not so much about the floods that you're seeing, although they are biblical, and that's not even a joke. This is more about the crop production losses, because for those of you who are unfamiliar with how our global agriculture works in the Northern Hemisphere, it is harvest time. And the beginnings of harvest time, depending on where you sit in the latitudes. So going over to Europe, we didn't have currents flowing from the Gulf of Mexico up past the United States over to the British Isles, etc. If it was just cold ocean water like it would be around the planet without that warming current going up there, places like London would be somewhat similar to Moscow in winter temperatures. So that flow there allows it to be a little bit more northerly latitudes for some of the crop production, but they were coming definitely into harvest. And at the same time, I did a full breakdown on this. The winter barley and the winter wheat was supposed to be planted at the same time as they harvested. Generally, when they harvest within 7 days, maybe even less. I mean, they're running tractor 24/7 at this point. The guys are working literally their headlights on at night and getting the harvest in, and they're turning the fields over into the next winter crop. But you got to realize that's all been delayed. Most of the fields are so muddy and soggy and humidity's up, and they don't really want to harvest because you can't have that moisture trapped in the grains because it requires another drying process, and then processors are backed up because the grains were wet anyway. But then there's so much stranded grain in the field right now, literally underwater, partially underwater. I saw some pictures in like Austria and also Poland, and where was that, Czech Republic and Hungary. You start to see the same images coming out again and again and again in the social media if you follow it. And you're looking at corn where barely the tops of the corn leaves are sticking out, and that's at harvest time. So the water's got to be at least 6 foot deep, maybe deeper. You're just going to lose an enormous amount of crop there. And the same thing we're experiencing here. Do you think North Carolina coming into harvest season right now what do you think is going to happen to, I know they're not a major producer, but whatever was there, do you think it'll be harvestable, or how long is it going to take for the fields to try out enough for me and you to walk in without sinking up to our kneecaps in mud? But imagine trying to put a multi-ton machine in on top of that same mud to get the grains out of there, or whatever it would be. Different kind of veg, doesn't matter if it's pumpkins. I got some crazy stuff about pumpkins here. It's an environmental nightmare. How do you dispose of your pumpkin? The decomposition in landfills, that kind of silliness is going around. But it all comes down to the same thing. Now, if you're just going to do a relationship analysis on this, the record floods, massive floods, near record flooding across the planet on 4 continents occurring simultaneously is all right in the same areas where we are starting, or quote unquote should begin our crop harvests this year. But it's not happening. Look for your food prices to go way up. And I'm not going to say way up. I'm going to say way, way up from this point.
Based upon what you just said, what would you be preparing right now? Like, what would you be stocking up on?
Well, again, it depends on where you can store it away, what kind of pest control you have, what type of temperature control you have, what type of humidity control you have, and the size of a space that you have to put that in play. So the easiest one would be, all right, buy some flour right now. All purpose if you can. I mean, yeah, there's some denser, we've been trying to bake some of our own breads, but we find that really, really like heavy 14% protein content. We have very bad luck trying to get breads to come up to look anything like they do out of the recipe book. Just rewind it back to like an 1849 sundry shop or dry goods shop going out into California for the gold rush. If you can stock your house, like really, not a kid you not, go watch some old movies. Like watch Gunsmoke, for example, or watch Little House on the Prairie, or something like this of that era, and look to see what was in the shops. And that's what you should be stocking. If you could stock up lards, oils, I know they don't last that long, but you can freeze them. Again, it comes down to how much space you have. But dry goods types of things, put them in the canning jars and wrap them up tight, screw the lids on, and then we're coming into a time where things are going to get much more expensive. In the rollout of central bank digital currencies, I am absolutely sure they're going to be tied to a digital rationing card, because they're just going to say something like, it's only this time. It's only for one thing. It's not going to be for your whole life, just this one thing. Everybody got to make sure nobody's stealing food because everybody's hungry. Like you can see how they'll play that heartstring, but they're going to phrase it as it's a way to guarantee equity and equality. You keep hearing these terms.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, certainly I've already started that on the flour side. As a matter of fact, I probably should go back and just inventory. I got mine in 5-gallon buckets with the oxygen absorbers in them. Different kinds of flour too. Different kinds of beans, white rice, brown rice, basmati rice, the mashed potatoes. You know what I'm talking about? Like the Instaflake kind of stuff. I also did that. Did a bunch of that. I got them in can formats, and surprisingly, canned potatoes are super cheap. Like you can get a decent sized can for like 90 cents and get like a 12 pack for like $8, total or something like that. I know it's not good to have everything canned. I understand the argument there, but going back to what you said, I wanted to get your thoughts.
You're going to have to think multifaceted on something. Just example of beans, right? So you have to think about, you can use them for planting seed for the following season. You got to think about different ways to cook them and understand that different beans cook in different ways. And then think about microgreens on that. And then think about trading or bartering for something else. Like it doesn't have to come to Mad Max world. We still trade with a lot of our neighbors for things that we overproduce. If you have certain types of beans, perhaps somebody else, even now, today, when the world's not falling apart, says, hey, I don't have that kind. I would like to trade you something. So you're going to have to start to think on a multifaceted on the same one single product or one single idea, but then use it in multifacet.
Absolutely, yeah. Be diverse. Yeah, I got more seeds too. I also have hydroponics set up because I'm still in suburbia to where when poop goes down, like I'm not going to sit outside with a rifle all day and try to guard my carrots type of thing. So I got everything indoors. So I've been telling folks, if you've got a home, like even if it's a 3 or 4 bedroom home or whatnot, and it's not being used, or even if it is used, like I would at this point, I would like tell the kids to sleep on a couch or something and make like 2 or 3 of the rooms just storage rooms, 4 buckets, make one room just for hydroponics, or like a half of a room for hydroponics. You know what I mean? Like I'd be using the rooms for your food capability, production, preparation, you know what I mean? But also, what about this? Because I've been going down that path, and I'm like, okay, the different kinds of breads, and I got like the chia seeds, like all those different seeds that are like really good that you can kind of like bake into a bread. But then it was brought to my attention because I got into the whole yeast problem. I'm like, well, yeast doesn't really last very long, even like the smaller packets. But one of my followers, subscribers, he said, well, just do beer, because certain beers pretty much last indefinitely. So I had to look for myself at some of those stronger, like stout beers, the really dark stuff. Most of those don't even have to be stored cooler. They could stay in 65 room temperature, and they'll pretty much last indefinitely. I think the textbook answer, they might say, well, a couple of years or whatnot, but I've read people where they've been making beer bread for a long time now. So that's like my next thing I actually want to do next week is I've been researching and trying to find some beers I'm going to order online to store that, because it has yeast in it. So I don't know, I just wanted to get your thoughts if you've ever done that. From what I gather, it looks like the stouts are the best, but I'm not sure.
And remember also, kids, they talk a lot and they have phones and they share stuff. So if you think you're going to have like a greenhouse, or you're going to do some like indoor grow with hydroponics, and you got kids around that they're not going to talk to their other friends and go, dude, we got the coolest thing, you got to come. And then the kids will, hey, Dad, you know what? Hey, the neighbor's got this thing. They're growing food in the house with this pipe system, man. So remember, kids talk, loose lips sink ships. And the thing about yeast, I do some of my own distilling. And I was learning from a friend. He's got a distillery, like full license. They bottle, they distribute everything. And looking back in history, the original winemakers, what they would do is once they got the grapes ready and squeezed out, they would just leave it open. There is natural yeast in the air literally floating around. Now, as long as you can get that out without a super windy day where you're getting a bunch of dust blowing in it, but literally they used to leave those, wooden casks or open for the yeast to get in there naturally. Don't have the timing on you or which kind of days they preferred to get the yeast in there. But that was a thing. There's natural yeast around our environment at all times. Yeast production and then saving that is a skill very few people have, because even for me, I would have to either buy the champagne yeast, the Lavalan 1116 or 1118 to do some of we were doing just like some low alcohol brandy stuff with that when we would take apples, and instead of doing cider, we would add those yeasts in there to try to boost up the alcohol content a little bit. So that kind of yeast is specialty yeast for people doing specialty things, but for me to make that yeast, nah. Now I've heard that I could save after we do the mash where the liquids and the solids separate, that when you're racking that off, that you could save the bottom portion that had a lot of, let's say, solids in there still, and you could use that and then recycle it again. I've heard that being done, but I'm not at that level because I'm like, only cost a few pennies to get another, packet. But in a pinch, you would have to think that way of recycling what you've already done through a process and keep it into a continuous batch, because you couldn't put that aside for very long before it would start to get moldy and thing. You don't want to try to start with that as your inoculant. No way. You want cleanliness is next to godliness, especially when you're brewing or distilling, right?
Well, you're giving us something to think about. Yeah, and I didn't know some of those points that you made. But yeah, I mean, in the short term, yeah, you could just get the little packets. But I always think long term, man. Like I'm always like, what's the long term solution? And if I can't find a long term solution, then you go with the short term, and hopefully something comes up later, or you step upon some new knowledge or whatnot. I know I got some videos here, global skies, red sky warnings. It's just interesting because my latest article on this one Catholic mystic talking about when the world basically loses its mind is some insiders call it the event coming or whatnot. She indicates before this happened, a preliminary sign is the sky will take on a morbid blue color. Then it'll be making all kinds of weird sounds in the sky that we've been hearing, these strange sounds like a lion roaring in the sky, which a lot of people seem to think, and maybe you agree or disagree, that it's like a weakening of our electromagnetosphere. You may have even mentioned that on the show in times past. But basically, like a whole lot of phenomena will happen before people actually turn on one another, and it turns into like a zombie apocalypse type of thing. It's an interesting prophecy, but what did you warn about a few days ago?
Well, that was it, that the skies seem to be giving you clear and stark warnings before something large approaches. Now, for these third set of storms, they had 2 green skies and 1 red sky, and the shelf clouds are just something to behold when you look at that. I mean, the power of man over nature when you see some of these shelf clouds that are downright scary. I mean, you just as a normal common sense thinker, when you see some of the colors in these shelf clouds rolling toward you, or skies on an approaching storm or typhoon, turn everything as far as the eye can see into a different color, and usually like magentas or some kind of off red color you're not used to seeing. At that point, when do you really take the sign for what it is and then, start to move indoor or prepare? Because nature is absolutely 1000% giving us more clear warnings, and that's the whole thing. Clearer warnings in the coloration of the sky and the density of color. If you think about sound as a wave itself, it's a frequency. So you get a frequency that you can convert into sound, and then it'll put out a certain resonance. And if you have a flat plate with salt, it'll take on a certain shape called harmonics. Cymatics is another name for that. But if you bring up that into a faster vibratory pattern, it turns into a color spectrum. So just think about from going on a sound wave into a color wave. It's the same frequency, just on a much faster vibration. So within that, you got to think, all right, what's being disturbed and why is the output different? I mean, generally you got red, but now it's coming in, 50 shades of red. It's like split the frequency into 50 sub-frequencies. This is interesting. I was going to do this in tonight's video here. Earth's ring current is leaking. So when you're talking about magnetics or electromagnetism, and they just found that there's a current that's within our atmosphere that they could harvest with the electrostatic harvesting, atmospheric harvesting. There was a geomagnetic storm, one of many. They're too numerous to even remember the last one, from like 2 days ago to 1 week ago to 2 weeks ago. They're just continuous now. That they saw a red band stretching across the sky, signaling that, quote unquote, Earth's ring current has sprung a leak. That's exactly what you described there. That boundary layer that locks in on a supposed, let's think of it as the shield of our planet, has a rip or a crack in it. Now, what would cause that, and is that harmonic based, frequency based, that is causing that rip? And it's plasma that's rolling in, and they call it the air glow. They've tried to give it a name, Steve, but it's too high up to be Steve, because Steve is generally these plasma ribbons that are wrapped on themselves. They're plasma filaments that are generally at the lower edges of the aurora, not something that's 100 miles up or more at where the ionosphere cracked. And you can see this, this air glow coming in, for a better term. They call it a red arc. There's actually a new name for this phenomenon. They're trying to peg this one as a red arc. But the Steve field-aligned current wrapped plasma filament is the best they're trying to do, not to spook people, because something happened with the magnetic field. But then we're looking at all these magnetic field changes on the planet and intensity strengths, and now there's a few people saying that we're declining at 1% per year, not 1% per decade or 1% per 5 years. That we're on that trajectory now, a 1% per year decline in the Earth's magnetic field. So if we reach some rollover point, it would definitely be visible, and you would start to hear signs or sounds in the skies, and you would start to see these unusual colors, which you're starting to see. So now what?
Exactly. Now what? Yeah. No, it ties in with some other prophecies too, but one specifically with Fatima, where, if I'm not mistaken, there was like a red sky warning shortly before World War II. But just moving ahead for where we see we're at with geopolitically going on, yeah, our eyes are towards the skies, as Father Malachi Martin had forewarned too as well. Definitely a lot of warnings happening around us.
Well, let me throw one other one at you here. This will go right into line with strangeness. Asteroid PT5 is going to be a new mini moon starting September 29th. Earth's gravity will trap a 30-foot wide asteroid in and become a second moon for 56.6 days before it's able to get enough centrifugal force to come out of our gravitational pull. So we're going to have two moons here for a moment, and that's only happened a handful of times before since the 1500s that people had noticed.
Yeah, I've seen that article pop up quite frequently over the last few months. I'm glad you re-mentioned that one. I've talked about it a few times. I didn't have the name of it down. At least I called it probably something different. What about the news story about Apophysis from 20 whatever year? They're saying it allegedly will pass close. They're saying it might come a little bit closer, and now there's just like an extra % chance it might hit us now or something like that. So who the heck knows? But Wormwood.
It's building into that biblical prophecy. It's building into the end times narrative. And I really, just with all honesty, think out there that they're no longer going to keep us. And this, I talked to Lynette Zhang, and she told me the same thing about markets and stuff. She's like, well, when they purposely start to push the fear narrative, you know that's the end. Because right now they're trying to keep the stability narrative so you can continue to invest, keep your money in whatever instruments out there. But once it's really going to crash, they're going to push the fear to get you to withdraw the money to amplify that and cause a larger crash. But look what the messaging is now. It's all about end times. Everything's end times. The world's ending. Like the world ending messaging is just off the hook right now. So dissect it. Let's walk down the mind experiment together here, Eric. Okay, so they're putting the end times, like why even stay alive anymore? Why even build a future? Why even invest in the future? Why even do anything in the future? Because it's all about to end right now. So this is like a dual messaging, but on the other side, they're like, get ready for your 401k in 50 years when you can retire. We only raised the retirement age to 72 or 73. It's so good. Hey, you youngsters got to keep helping people with Social Security. But then on the other side, well, Apophis is going to come. The world's going to end. We're going to crack in the magnetosphere. We got a magnetic field shrinking. Global storms, 4 continents. We're losing our crops, but keep investing. And by the way, pay your taxes and go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, some like double tonguedness there. I'm right there with you. And, of course, from a Christian standpoint, we always want to stay in faith and hope and realize that there is, a better day coming. So I say to my folks, we got to keep, as eagles, our eyes on the rainbow beyond the storm. Like we're literally going through it. Yeah, there's fear kind of all around us. It should just be bouncing off of our ship, so to speak. We'll be all right type of thing. We'll get through this. And then the people who are fearing and succumbing to fear, this is going to be something else. I mean, there's like Jesus even forewarned in Matthew 24, Luke 21, frightful days are ahead. People are going to die of fright, of anticipation of what the next birth pang is. We're going to be hit one after another. So we really haven't seen anything yet. As crazy as a lot of these earth changes are happening, I'm expecting this to be worse than the 2012 movie, worse than a lot of these post-apocalyptic war movies like Book of Eli. Like it's going to be like kind of a combination mixture of both. But I just say kind of enjoy the journey. You know what I mean? You got to prepare as best you can for the long haul, but you got to still stay in the moment. It'll all work itself out in the end. That's why I think keep people in hope and keep encouraging people. What I'm trying to do when it really gets bad and it really gets worse to keep people moving forward. Because you can't, like you said, if you stay locked in fear right now, what are you going to do? Because I know a lot of people like that. I don't know if you do. I have a different disposition, you know what I mean? If I'm able to do something and help other people in the process, then we want to do that. And we got the 4 horsemen, it looks like, right? With pandemics and pestilences and famine and war. And
so I did this video, the next 3 things that'll shape our civilization in the next 6 months. And the first one coming up here is this planetary squaring October of this year. And there's so much going on and all these strange electromagnetic disturbances and just planetary discombobulation is going lockstep with that, and governments are responding lockstep with that. So this first event that we need to cross through is late October of this year. And then we're coming into something called the Shepherd's Cross. You might be familiar with that term. So if anybody out there has any kind of orbital diagram software, I encourage you to go out to, December 6th. Now, what you're going to see is Jupiter, Earth, Mercury, Sun in a direct line. And at the same day, in the same time, in the same seconds, we have a second crossing of Mars, Earth, and Venus. You know, when I showed it to a couple people, they just smacked their foreheads and go, "Oh, that's the Shepherd's Cross." And I wasn't familiar with this, put a knife in the bread and kind of thing. It was the first time I'd heard that term, Shepherd's Cross, but once I saw it with the number of, you know, there's 4 in a line up and then 3 in a different direction to make that crossing pattern. So again, Jupiter, one of the largest gravitational bodies, anytime the Earth, Jupiter, and Sun line up, there's always 7.0 earthquakes, whether they want to admit it or not. There's an enormous amount of study done on this. Please do your own research on that. We get some of the largest quakes of magnitude 7s or 8s when we get Jupiter, Earth, and Sun in a direct line. But now we have Mercury, which is basically the iron core planet, and this is going to be interesting because if you do a lot of, and again, if you go deep into a little bit of research, they show that for some reason Mercury is our protector. Now they can't explain it, but you could if you believed in electricity or electromagnetism as being the driver of our sun and the way it creates that electromagnetic field through the rest of the solar system. Because when Mercury, the solid iron cored planet, comes in front of the sun at the same time the Earth is in front of the sun, sunspots just disappear. That's why we rarely get like a full direct equatorial CME directed at the planet when anything Mercury is around. So that seems to nullify or deflect, or something electromagnetic disruption occurs when that large iron cored planet comes in front of us in the sun, because we would have had a lot more, you know, direct CMEs on us. So we have Jupiter, the Earth, Mercury, and the Sun in a perfect line. Now put that combination in of the things I just described. And then the cross on that's going to be Mars, Earth, and Venus. December 6th. So that comes just a month and a half after. So whatever happens in October and people are still shaking their heads, and this is where I wanted to try to go into it. People are going to be so scared and so unnerved when this comes. Now we're coming into a planetary Shepherd's Cross just a month and a half later, and whatever earthquakes are generated from this or sort of tidal anomalies are generated from it, that is going to be the second one. And then the third event comes where we're going to be completely opposite. We'll be 100% on the other side of the sun by ourselves with no other planetary bodies in front of us to help us deflect any type of space debris coming in. So if you're going to watch Men's Hearts Stop, that would be it. A continuous bombardment of our planet from meteors and meteorites for 4 straight months. Ground shocks, air bursts that have ground shock with window breaking and subsonic winds. This is what would be anticipated for April, coming into April, because this 2024 here, October event, we are sandwiched in the middle between the 4 gas giants making a square and the sun. It's like we're going to run through 2 magnetic fields. But as we spin around, because those gas giants, their orbits are really, really, really slow compared to our Earth. We just spin around the sun every 365 days, where you're looking at, 80 years on, or 87 years on an orbit further out. So we're going to get way in front of all that. And as we come out, we're going to be the only body in our solar system in front of the sun by itself, with everything directly behind us tugging. If you just want to go gravitationally, I'll stay on the page with you. You have all the heaviest gravitational bodies in the entire solar system directly behind us, plus the sun behind us, and we are the only thing in front. So whatever gets tugged into our solar system as we're transiting through this debris-rich region of space is going to get slammed in the face of our planet for about 4 months. That would make men's hearts stop. And then after these 2 events preceding that, and we come into this cometary tail / whatever remnants of comets into this meteorite barrage thing for 4 months, I believe at the end of the 4 months, people would be terrified, including myself. I already know what's coming, so I'm just going, this is going to be an interesting time to be alive.
Well, the 3 days of darkness prophecy, which I have at the end of the tribulation period, so I don't think it's anytime soon. So I don't think the Antichrist has shown up yet, and that would be literally in that last year. The prophecy basically foretells us being locked on by this planet or whatever this thing is. I think Gil Broussard now says it's like a planet-sized comet or so, whatever this thing is. And it is found in Catholic prophecy. It was revealed to Marie-Julie Jaheny, the one I did the movie on, that there is something inbound.
And if you like this type of content, make sure you go on over to civilizationcycle.com. Sign up for our show notes. You'll get a weekly on different topics in just a single page bullet point format. So you can start the conversation with others and then do some deep diving research yourself. See you next time. Bye for now.
Pro Clear Cleanse is the most powerful spray cleaner on the market today. No elbow grease necessary. Pro Clear Cleanse cuts through grease and grime like a chef's knife. Finally, the one cleaner that can do it all. Powerful surfactant cleaning technology cleans ovens, glass, porcelain, even polished wood. Environmentally friendly, less packaging and waste with no harsh smells, pet safe, child safe. 5 tablets equals 1 bottle of traditional cleaner. It's 5 months of cleaning for a fraction of the cost. Behold the grease-erasing power of Odor Crush. Simply drop a tablet into your bottle of warm water and shake it so it is evenly diluted. Spray the surface you want cleaned. Let set longer for tougher grease. Take a paper towel or a reusable cloth and wipe. Done and done. One of the best things about Pro Clear Cleanse, it's you can take it anywhere. Hiking, camping, or on vacation. Without having to buy or bring cleaner, you can store the same potential in the tablets, then just add water and bam, you have a bottle of cleaner.